Well, hello, friends, and welcome to the Commander's Table. It's Wednesday evening here in the Olympic National Forest in Washington State, and I have another very interesting guest for you. I'm pretty excited to bring him to the table and to have a conversation with him. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, and we try not to beat you up with all of the stuff that you're already hearing all about. It's not that we don't care about COVID. It's not that we don't care about people protesting for their rights in the streets. It's not that we don't care about those things. It's just that liberty is a big picture, and we want to not lose track of all of the other elements that, frankly, I think some folks are trying to distract us from. So I've been trying to bring you guests that have intelligent conversation about other issues besides just those two big ones that you're hearing about in the news. Not that we won't talk about that at all, but there are, like I say, there are other things we can talk about. So I've got to introduce to you, you can see him over there next to me right now. This is Ricky Harrington Jr., and Ricky is a candidate for senator in the great state of Arkansas. And let's see, your website, Ricky, is rdh4senate.com. Am I right there?
Yes, we actually just relaunched our website, and it is rickyharringtonsenate.com.
rickyharringtonsenate.com. Listen, folks, you do need to go there. You need to read about his platform. And I'm going to give a plug near the end of the broadcast because all of our friends need to send Ricky at least a few bucks to keep his campaign going. Even if you only send him just the money that you'd spend on your latte if you were allowed out of your house. We'll talk about that toward the end of the show. But right now, I want to introduce to you a great libertarian, a great American, a patriot, and a guy who's going to tell you what he would do if elected to Senate. Ricky Harrington. Take it away, Ricky.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate you having me on the show. Well, my name is Ricky Dale Harrington Jr. I decided to go by my full name from my constant experience going overseas. They make you fill out your whole full name on everything, and so it became a habit for me. And I decided to, as I'm running, just use my whole full name, Ricky Dale. If that doesn't sound like somebody from Arkansas, I don't know what sounds like somebody from Arkansas.
Yeah, my grandmother's from Arkansas, Ricky Dale, so that's fine with me.
Yes, sir. I'm trying to do my best and my part as an American citizen to try to make a difference in our republic. And my hope in running, number one hope, of course, is to beat Tom Cotton. Number two is to inform the people that they don't really need some, special leader to go out in front whenever they already have the power themselves. The Constitution has given the people the power. And our representatives, they have a duty to do the will of the people as they go to Washington, or they go to Little Rock, or they go to whatever your state capital may be. And recently, there have been a lot of laws passed here in Arkansas, especially something like it's colloquially called the petition killer. And it's making it more difficult for the people of Arkansas to amend the state constitution. And so whenever you have things like that, it just got a stirring deep in my soul, so to speak, and I decided to run. There's a couple of issues that I'm running on, but we can get to those later on, but that's kind of the gist of it right there.
Absolutely. And why Ricky Dale? Why not somebody else? What makes you the guy that we want to support for Senate?
Well, it may sound a little strange to say this, but my integrity is one thing. I'm not going to allow the wiles of the political game in Washington to throw me off my goals and my principles. I'm not going to allow the allure of power or the allure of money. I've worked in the criminal justice system, and I'm running on the criminal justice plank. That's my number one plank. I've been a chaplain, been a treatment coordinator in the Cummins prison in Arkansas. And I'm sure you've heard of that movie Brubaker. It was loosely based off the Cummins prison. And so being inside the
not a
system,
flattering situation at all.
definitely not, definitely not. Me as a person, I want to stand up for what's right. I want to call out the injustices and just get rid of the corruption that's in Washington. I know I'm just one person, but if one person can stand up along the way, maybe others will stand up also.
We've had a whole lot of one persons in our history that I think we can recognize. Sometimes one person does make a difference. And, I'm not going to start naming the long list, but every one of us knows that there are people who made, it's a sacrifice what you're doing. I'm going to say, as a guy who just finished a campaign for president, I and my wife and our road manager, Earl, we gave up a full year of our lives that we can never get back. People might think that that's a fun thing to do. There were certainly some wonderful things. We met a lot of really great people and had some very good moments. But what you're doing, Ricky Dale, when you're talking about running for office, you're giving up your privacy. You're allowing people to dig into things about you. And in fact, what a lot of people don't know, you give up certain legal rights that a private citizen has. People can say things about you, and you've got no recourse at all because you chose to make yourself a public person. So you're really putting a target on your back when you're running for office. And I happen to have some love for the state of Arkansas, but we know that there's some dirty politics in Little Rock too. We've seen enough of that to know that that's not a new thing. So you've got some people who are definitely going to be gunning for you if you show any competition at all to them. So are you brave enough? I mean, you're brave enough to go into a prison as a chaplain. That gives me some confidence in you. But are you brave enough to deal with what you have to deal with running for Senate?
Yes. I spent 2 years in China as missionary. This is just an evidentiary. This is fact. And they don't allow people to go over there as missionaries in China.
Yeah.
If you have a church there in China, you have to register with the state. And if you are running an unregistered church, usually plainclothes police officers show up to your house. The missionaries that I replaced, they had some of those plainclothes police officers show up to their house with boxes full of transcripts of every conversation, every email, every phone call that they had, and they went through them. And of course, they came back to America because their contract was not renewed because they told them to stop having Bible studies inside their home. Wow. Unregistered churches there. So it was dangerous over there. It was wild. I'd do it again. So I think that's prepared me for this here.
I'm impressed. I've had friends who've gone to Cuba and China and other places as missionaries. I haven't, I've been a missionary down in Mexico. That's pretty welcoming, and we've been to Guatemala, but we've never been to any place where you literally could be arrested, you could be disappeared, and that could happen to you in China if you're not careful. So I'm impressed that you were willing to do that you're willing to buck the government system, because honestly, I think what we've seen here this year, and I'm not one of those libertarians who's really big on all the conspiracy theories, but I think honestly we have a concerted effort to take our freedoms away from us right now, and I think the Libertarian Party and the cause of liberty, period, has never been more important to the American people. So I'm looking for brave people who know they're going to put a target on their back to stand tall for the issues that we're going to have to stand for this year. So I'm glad to see that you're not afraid of it. So tell me a little bit about you told me when we were in the green room about somebody making a comment about us being an under-incarcerated nation, or words to that effect.
Yes, sir. My opponent, Senator Cotton, has stated that we don't have an over-incarceration problem. We have an under-incarceration problem. Having 25% of the world's population in one country, I don't understand how anyone could ever say that.
Yeah, a quarter of all of the incarcerated people on the planet we've got in the United States. And
Yes.
And Senator Cotton is saying we need to put more people in jail. That'll solve our problems. Is that a fair statement of what he said?
I would think it is a fair statement. Apparently, it's not working, because we have, working in the system. There's some people that have 6 or 7 returns, and
that's a fact. I've done a big study of criminal justice for my own campaign, and most of the people in prison are in prison more than once. It's like 60% or something like that are in prison more than once, which you could say, well, that's because they're criminals. But when you look at the facts, the truth of the matter is, Ricky Dale, we could all be in prison, if there's not a one of us that hasn't done something in our lives that couldn't land us in jail if an aggressive DA were to grab hold of it. Isn't that true?
Yes. I want to share 2 things with you. The first thing, whenever I was going through my initial training, I was a non-security staff, so I wasn't a correctional officer. They call us the free world peoples inside the prison, because we don't wear the correctional officer uniform. And the instructor told us never to say to an inmate, well, if you can't do the time, you shouldn't do the crime. Because you may not know, only certain people have access to see what's in an inmate's file,
right,
to see what they've done and all of those things. So you never know what they might have done. They might have had 1 glass of wine and ran a stop sign and killed someone. That could be any one of us. That could be any one of us. And the duty of correctional staff is to help inmates rehabilitate so they can re-enter society as law-abiding citizens. Now, whenever you go saying things like that, that kind of cuts off the conversation right there. That person has got you marked. They're going to try to find a way to get you because you talk to them stupid, as they say. The second thing is there's some prosecutors that say, I'll put innocent people in prison all the time. It doesn't bother me at all. And there's 2 ways to look at that comment. The first way is, well, everybody says that they're innocent, and you're innocent until proven guilty. So that's just somebody who's guilty saying they're innocent. That's just, I guess you could say, human nature. I want to get away from the punishment that I should receive. The second way to look at it is, this prosecutor actually knew this person was innocent and tried to put him away on greater charges. It's happened to a lot of people. We can either make you plea bargain or we can go to trial. It's your choice. And they know that if you went to trial, you'd have to pay your legal fees and all the other things. And you might have a strong case for winning, for beating the charge that you have. But because the people are so afraid to go to trial, they plea bargain, and whatever is in the plea bargain, they accept those terms, which is a contract.
Yeah. And I think most of us have watched television shows. Like you, I've been involved in the system and I've seen it firsthand. But most people are familiar with the fact that they will back you up against a wall with threats of long sentences and all kinds of things. And many people end up accepting a plea bargain to spend a couple of years in prison, which is a felony rap and goes on their record for all of their life. But they'll take that rather than 15 years or something like that. And that is a very, very common situation. In fact, the courts prefer to see people take plea bargains over tying up the court docket with the case. So they will push people toward taking a plea bargain. The judges lean that way. So we got a lot of people in the system. That's not to say that they never did anything wrong, but we've got a lot of people in the system who are there because they got caught up in something. And as you and I were talking in the green room, and I'm going to lose some libertarian votes here, but I'll tell you real honestly, I believe some people belong in prison. I believe, for example, people who beat people up, child molesters, people who have done legitimately violent crimes and legitimately hurt somebody and are at a risk of doing it again. It wasn't just an incidental crime of passion. It was something in them. We need to protect society from them, and we need to protect them from recidivism. But that said, that's such a small percentage of the people we've got in prison. And even people who have committed a crime, like somebody steals your car, they're not doing you any good in prison. The best thing in the world would be to keep them out in public where they can get a job, where they can make restitution and those things. We don't think that way in our culture. We want to get a pound of flesh and put people in prison. And drug offenses, and we could go on for days about whether drug laws are good or bad, but there are a whole bunch of people in prison who never hurt anybody, and they become institutionalized, and they come out, and as you said, and I'll let you go on with this, they become repeat offenders. They become institutionalized into that sort of thing, and you've seen that.
Yes. Let's say someone has a drug charge and they get a 3-year sentence. Now, whenever somebody goes into the system, they go into the prison, they send them to what they call a short hair barracks, because they used to shave the heads of the newly incarcerated. So still to this day, we call it a short hair barracks, where they put all the new commits. And so there are some inmates that choose to stay in those short hair barracks because it's a good place to recruit. And so you have this person that has a drug charge. Maybe they had a half an ounce of marijuana and they threw the book at them. So they go into the prisons, they get recruited into gangs, and there's a lot of things inside those prison walls that people don't understand. There's some people that should be there, but the people that have committed drug offenses, they don't need to be there. They get recruited into gangs. After they serve their time, they go back out and they participate in gang activity when they're free. And then they get caught and they go right back in and out of the system. And then some of them might move up in the gangs, and it's not pretty in there. It's just a cycle over and over again.
And honestly, there are a lot of people who'd say, "Well, that's why they call it prison. It's not supposed to be fun. It's not called day camp." And we get that. I mean, honestly. And again,
yes.
As you and I agree, some people in there need to be in there. But when you take these, people who are committing an offense that doesn't actually hurt anybody, we can talk more along the line about decriminalizing things and
restorative justice.
Yeah, restorative justice, decriminalization, all kinds of issues that we can talk about. But just right off the bat, incarcerating people who have not actually harmed anybody and who don't run a very high risk of causing harm to anybody is just contrary to everything that makes sense in our culture. And the thing to remember, and again, I did a pretty deep study into this. The children of incarcerated people run an incredibly higher probability of being incarcerated at some point in their own lives. And
Yes.
and part of that, it's not just that they're taught to be criminals. It's actually a dynamic that we create by pulling one or more of the parents out of their family life and creating a family dynamic that often has to work around where mom or dad is incarcerated, moving to another town or traveling to that town to be able to visit mom or dad, or being completely cut off because they won't visit them in those places. All of those things create a dynamic where young people end up being sort of sucked into a different culture, and we see so often, we see them ending up incarcerated as well.
Yes. There was a few generational inmates in that prison, and that was one of the saddest things I've seen in my life. That's not to excuse anything that they've done. I want people to understand there are some very dangerous men that are in prison that probably shouldn't get out of there.
Yes.
I'm just telling you, from going in there and talking to some of these men, they'll be real quick to cut your head off.
Yeah.
So that's just a fact of it. But you know, again, as you said, we're talking about people that have committed victimless crimes, or people that have committed a crime where it would be more beneficial to establish a restorative justice where they pay their victims, they pay restitution, they try to make it right with them and their victim when the property is stolen or things like that, rather than throwing them in prison, locking the key, as I said earlier. And you know, if you can't do the time, you shouldn't do the crime. Never saying that we're trying to establish some compassion, because we don't know what tomorrow is going to bring for us. We can make a mistake, and so we should always try to be compassionate. But also, you know, justice and mercy are two sides of the same coin.
Amen.
You can't have one without the other.
Amen.
Because in administering justice, you're showing mercy to your victim, but also you can't go too far, because it's not about justice anymore. It's about revenge, and then just pure hatred. We're pouring out our vengeance on someone. And
somebody wrote, and I'll probably butcher it, but there was something written a while back that everybody commits something like 3 felonies a day. Or again, I know I'm butchering this statistic, but the concept that it's virtually impossible for us to wake up and put our feet on the floor in this country anymore without committing some kind of felony, whether willingly or unwillingly. You know, here's an example for you. You're driving down the street, and you see that the light is turning red, and your buddy in the seat next to you says, "Don't stop, just go." And so you punch it and you go through the intersection. Now, obviously, that's just a traffic citation. You've only violated a traffic law there. But if the DA gets hold of the fact that your buddy told you to do it, now you have conspired to commit a traffic offense, and the conspiracy is actually a felony. So as silly as it sounds, we can, just being totally unaware, just being in everyday innocent silly situations, we can do things that could land us in jail if somebody had the opportunity or the desire to make that happen to us.
yes.
And there are a lot of people who get caught with a little bit of agricultural product in their pocket or something like that, and that leads to a snowball of events in their life. You know, they end up behind bars. Oftentimes, because they're covering for somebody else, or because because they don't want to involve other people in their crime, and so they end up being the one who pays the price for it. So, I think you and I are in agreement on this, and so criminal justice reform becomes an incredibly important aspect of fixing our culture. And in fact, like I said at the lead here, I don't want to go too far into the protesting in the streets because I think it's being talked about a lot. But don't you think, Ricky Dale, that if we had legitimate criminal justice reform in our country, that would go a long way to easing the tension that we're seeing in the streets right now?
Absolutely. And it's mainly dealing with the interactions that people have with police. And we probably wouldn't have as many interactions with police if they were not so concerned with the victimless crimes or other things. And I was 19. I had got pulled over for not putting my signal on within 100 feet of the stop sign. And I remember thinking, how can you gauge that inside your police car? Do you have like some type of thing in your windshield that projects where 100 feet is before the stop sign, where you take a look at my car and you take a look at the stop sign and let you know when I put that signal on? I mean, that's a little too much. Not putting your signal on within 100 feet of your stop sign is the reason why I pulled you over.
And does it matter? Did anybody, again, is the law there to serve us, or are we there to serve the law? Was anybody harmed when you failed to signal that turn 100 feet before the intersection? And that needs to be the question whenever there's any infraction at any level. Was anybody harmed? Is the law protecting the people, or are we here to serve the law? And I think that the train has skipped off the track a little bit in that regard. So I want to mention, because you and I were talking, you have some young children, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
And
They
I saw their
6,
pictures.
5, and 2.
6, 5, and 2. I'm jealous of you, my friend. I really am. I'll tell you what. I'm a grandfather who's not. My grandkids are in Hawaii, so I don't get to be with them often enough, and I really am jealous of you. And I know we talked about the stacks of diapers in the room there with you and all of that. But I would just, I'd give a major organ or a limb to have those days back, but a whole lot of what you're doing is about the world that your kids are going to grow up in. Tell me about the world that you want your kids to grow up in.
Well, I definitely want them to grow up in a world where they are not fearful of the government that is supposed to be the arbiter or the referee in society, but to be a stabilizer. And the way that things are going now, with legislation, if you're paying attention to what laws are being passed, we are moving more toward an authoritarian government here in America. It's not conspiracy theory at all. You can play connect the dots. It's easy. You can play connect the dots. It's not that hard at all. And I said this to the state legislature whenever they passed a law in 2019 to try to keep third parties off the ballot. I told them, I've seen something like this before. While I was in China, President Xi Jinping, this is in 2014, he was going around and getting rid of people that were corrupt, okay? And these were all people that were very high in the upper echelons of the Chinese Communist Party, and they were getting knocked off for corruption. And in Chinese culture, they have the guanxi, where you give people gifts expecting them to give you a favor later on. That's how you build a relationship with people. It's part of their culture. I'm not going to say whether it's right or wrong, but that's very prevalent for people who work for the government, for someone to kind of grease their palms to get the wheels moving. And so whenever that was happening while I was over there, I told one of my friends, he's getting rid of his political opponents. That's what he's doing. He's not really going on an anti-corruption campaign. And what happened after that? He declared himself president for life. So
yeah, and
if you got any
that's the
sense,
way totalitarianism works. Exactly.
yes. And that's how it is right now. I said it while he was doing it. And in the 2018 elections, Mark West got 2.9% of the popular vote. And we only need 3% of a gubernatorial election's popular vote to gain permanent ballot access here in Arkansas. So they passed a law that increased the threshold from 10,000 signatures to 3% of the total electorate that participated in the previous election. So I'd like for them to grow up in a country where there's no authoritarian regime, where the people have the power. I hope they are still able to go out and fish, to go out and swim without our rivers and lakes and ponds being polluted.
Wow.
Be able to, find a job that they want. There's a lot of people that have tried to get me into the real estate business that have used the term wage slave. Don't be a wage slave. Come get in the real estate business, so you can get passive income. But I know this is not going to sound very libertarian, but it's just a hope of mine. I hope we don't go so far down the road to where America has become an oligarchy and people are wage slaves. That's a hope of mine. And I'm just going to say that out loud.
Honestly, there on both sides, but particularly on the Democratic side, there are a lot of people pushing for increases in minimum wage and that sort of thing, increases in employee benefits. And I think what a lot of Americans don't realize is that it really isn't a favor to people. That turns people into a wage slave. A whole lot of Americans are little more than indentured servants, in debt more than they can possibly ever pay off, and they're chasing that next increment of pay raise or whatever. And I have to speak as I was in real estate in Hawaii, and frankly, I was good at it. I made money at it, but I didn't enjoy it very much. And I won't go into reasons why, because I don't want to offend anybody here, but honestly, it just wasn't the field for me. But I have a dear friend in Indiana running for U.S. Congress, Tanya Millis, and there are good, ethical, decent people working in real estate right now, and I have a great deal of respect for them. But I think what we need to be able to do in this country is get rid of the idea of trading hours for paycheck, and instead trade productivity for paycheck. If I produce 10 widgets a day for you, and I can do that in 15 minutes, I should get the same pay as a guy who takes all 8 hours of his day to produce those widgets. Shouldn't matter how many hours a day that I take. Now, there are some people who will work for us. The person who answers the phone, they need to be there for a period of time. But the idea of trading hours for money is really kind of counterproductive in most cases, because it teaches people to drag their work out and be as non-productive as they possibly can.
Yes.
Well, a little story. I'll just jump. Pardon me for stealing the mic, but it is my show, so we'll do that. But when I was commanding a little NATO base in Italy, when I took command of the base, I told all of my division chiefs, look, the cook needs to know who's going to be at lunch so that he knows how much lunch to make. So everybody has to stay on the base up to lunchtime. After lunch, if the work is done, I don't care if you cut everybody loose. And we went, in the time that I had, that 13 months that I had command of that base, we went from the worst track record on our Lorenz station that was on the base. We went from the worst track record in the world to tied for the best in 13 months. And our people worked roughly half the number of hours that people on other bases worked. So we can, as people, we can produce amazing things if it's not tied to the hours that we're working, but instead just the encouragement to get work done. So, okay, I'm sorry, off of my soapbox. I'm a preacher and that's what I do. But, I think you and I are on the same page. We want a world where our kids can grow up with opportunities and not be the slave to a paycheck. And I think the Fed is part of what has created this dynamic, this cycle of indentured servitude that we have.
I think the future is going to be a lot different than we can imagine it. I used to talk with my grandmother before she passed, asking if she ever thought that she'd be able to have a conversation with someone who was not there. And I was talking about like Skype and things like that. Did she ever imagine that she would see that type of technology? And I'm wondering what it's going to be like in the future. And I'm hoping that we don't go into any type of dystopian, future that everybody's fearing that we're going to go into. I'm an optimist, and I'm pessimistically optimist, or optimistically pessimistic. I'm not sure which way to describe myself. But
I think we've all we've seen those Orwellian sort of predictions, like you said, dystopian sort of futures. Those things are really possible. And Ricky Dale, that's why we're here talking right now. That's the reason that we're wasting our breath. That's the reason why you're putting yourself on the line right now. And I'm proud of you for doing it. To speak up and to wake people up and to maybe be a part of creating a better future than might happen otherwise.
I read that you have some experience in healthcare.
I do.
I used to work at a psychiatric hospital. They called my position the crisis prevention technician. That was a very nice, flowery way to basically say that guy's the takedown specialist.
Oh, wow.
And working there, it gave me a passion for healthcare. And healthcare is another one of the things that I'm running on. I never try to pull the wool over anybody's eyes. I personally benefited from the Affordable Care Act, and it helped me out. I was, trying to raise a family on one income, but as you saw, whenever we had the Republican trifecta, whenever President Trump took over and they had the House and they had the Senate, they were talking about repeal and replace Obamacare. And I wonder why they were talking about repeal and replace when they could have just said, well, we're going to amend it.
Right.
But right now, there's a big push for Medicare for all. And so it's kind of like a rebound from what happened with the Affordable Care Act. So we saw what you did. Right now, we think the solution is to double down on what we believed and try to force it on everybody. And what, one of my family friends told me this: who do you not hear complaining about the Affordable Care Act? Who was not complaining about it? The insurance companies.
It's a good
because
point.
They knew they were going to get a payday. I mean, a fat payday. But it kind of didn't work out the way everybody was expecting. And it still doesn't fix what's wrong with the system. And the problem is the rising cost of health care, but the quality of care is not rising equal to the cost of care.
Exactly.
And so the problem is the bedrock, the foundations of the system. But if you're going to try to fix it from Washington, you're not going to fix the system. And there's been some things that I've been thinking about. Direct primary care is one of the things that I like to tell everyone about. And that's where you pay your primary care physician a retainer fee, essentially. And that brings down the cost of, x-rays and other type of lab tests. And the doctor gets to spend most of his time treating patients rather than working on billing and overhead and all those other things.
Mm-hmm.
That could bring down the cost there. And having access to primary care physicians and making sure your health is,
That's
well, you
that's
won't have
sort
to
of
go
a
to a
spin.
specialist.
That's sort of a spin on when HMOs got their start in the 70s and into the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
That was kind of the idea at that time, was prepaid health care, and you kind of it was a type of insurance. You pay in advance, and then you get whatever care you need. The problem that we've gotten now is this notion that government has to provide this thing. And, both AOC and Elizabeth Warren, and to a lesser extent Bernie Sanders, have all provided plans that would insure everybody in the United States for health care. And all of those have been ranked by the Congressional Budget Office or other entities as just not being economically feasible. Elizabeth Warren's was $52 trillion over 10 years to pay for the healthcare needs of the country, greater than the current taxes for that time, just to provide health care. We can't do it. We can't meet the need. And then on top of that, as you pointed out, government doesn't do things well. We don't, when government is managing a thing, the prices go up and the quality goes down.
Like education. How many
Yeah, exactly.
hundreds of percents have college tuition gone up?
Exactly right. And now we've got predatory student loans and all of those things that are further damaging people. And healthcare is trapping people into employment situations. The whole idea, first behind HIPAA and then behind Obamacare, two big plans that the Democrats promised us, was that you could move on from one job to the next and your health care would follow you. And that has never materialized. The problem has only gotten worse. So, I'm with you 100% that we need some, I hate making it sound this simple, but we need some free market solutions for healthcare. We need healthy competition in healthcare. I've been to and lived in countries where it's a lot more affordable to get the things you need, but our government has created a monster that is just hungry for profits. So
Yes.
yeah, we definitely need to address that, and clearly doing more of the same is not the answer to solving that problem. We've got just a few. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, a patient cured is a customer loss.
You know what? That's not a lie. And in fact, we've, without getting into some of the wacko conspiracy stuff, but we've seen indications of people who have put very high prices on patents that could have done a lot of good for people, but they actually didn't want to release those patents into the public, so they made them so that people couldn't afford to use them. And that's not a new thing. That's been going on for a long time. Well, hey, I want
to talk to you about.
Go ahead.
I was saying, I do want to talk to you about something that's totally not involved with my campaign at all.
Okay.
I started reading John Bolton's book.
Oh boy. Okay, tell me. I haven't read any of it yet, so all right, dish the dirt, my friend.
and I've read maybe about 10 pages of the book, and it's oh gosh, it's a doozy.
Well, okay, so we have to remember John Bolton is not one of my favorite people on the planet, and he's writing about somebody who's not one of my favorite people on the planet. So, okay, that said, tell us about the book.
He essentially says what a lot of people have been saying, that Mr. Trump really wasn't fit for office. And in the beginning of the books, he talks about how chaotic the transition time between president-elect to being president. And he's going on about what job he was trying to get in the Trump administration. And he was talking about how he wanted to be a Secretary of State. He talked about his mustache totally not being the issue and whether or not Trump hired him. And if it was, God help us. That's the quote from the book. If his mustache went into whether or not he was going to hire him, God help this country.
Wow.
But he was mainly talking about, you can tell a lot about a coming administration, how they handle their picks, the cabinet picks. And you take a look, he uses the term the adults in the room. And what he means by that is people like John Kelly, General Mathis, H.R. McAllister. If that's his name, right? I don't want
to. Yeah.
I think it's McAllister.
McAllister, yeah.
And a lot of them have come and went. And now he has an administration of a lot of yes men. But I was mainly thinking about, if we had ourselves a libertarian president, who do you think would be in that libertarian president's cabinet?
Wow.
Because I'm a libertarian, yes. I'm a former Democrat. And a lot of the ideas, and this is coming from experience in running things and administrating and things like that, you never know what your ideas are going to be like until you get boots on the ground, until you're right there, until you put the rubber to the road. And I was just wondering, well, I guess I'd have to ask Dr. Jorgen who she would pick. But you could speculate.
I hope Joe would pick Sam Robb for Secretary of Defense or something like that. Sam's one of the really great guys in the party. Very, very smart, very well informed, and you know, I've spent time with him to know that he's got. He uses good judgment and talks to people, which is one of the problems in this administration, as you know. Is that the president operates in an echo chamber. He's looking for people to tell him that his ideas are good and right so that he can move forward with them, rather than, you know, I think a good libertarian, we surround ourselves with people who might even tell us that we're making a mistake and you know, help us to make better choices. So Sam Robb would be one of my first choices for Joe's cabinet, and I know he's working with her in Pennsylvania right now, and of course Spike Cohen running for vice president right now. One of the great things that Spike has to offer, in addition to just being a very smart guy, is that he is able to connect the administration with younger people and diverse types of thought in the country, and we need to not just be one kind of person and one kind of thought. We need to reach out to all age groups, all ethnic groups, all political ideologies. We need to reach out to a bunch of people, and I think Spike offers us that in the administration. So I hope as vice president that Spike would be an active VP in the administration. So who else? Who do you think might be in the?
He's very eloquent.
Yes, he is. So you're going to be over in Senate, so you know we need you over in Senate. Of course, you'll be working with Spike because he'll be the president of the Senate as vice president of the United States. But who else? What other libertarians? Larry Sharp, and there's people on his team. Kerry Bittner. I don't know if you know Kerry, but amazing behind the scenes person in Larry Sharp's team. But who else?
I guess I'm gonna go kind of a roundabout way of answering the question, but answer the question. Right now in my campaign, I'm trying to build a coalition of Democrats and Republicans here in Arkansas. because right now it's pretty much going to be we're believing a 1v1 race against me and Tom Cotton. And so there's a lot of energized people, since there's no Democrat on the ballot, and we want to include some of those people. And I like to build bridges. It's hard to cross a burnt bridge.
Yes.
And I don't know a lot of, because most of the bureaucracies, they are going to serve, whether it's a Democratic president or a Republican president, they are there to carry out the missions of whatever branch they are part of, like the State Department. They're going to carry out the wishes of whatever the president is. They are there to do their job. So I would be looking at people that have been working in those fields a long time, that are competent, that are experts, that have had boots on the ground, that know what they're talking about, but still have the ability to exercise what we believe, that we should be the aggressor in foreign conflicts anymore. Essentially, that we should be using diplomacy and economics to bring people who are different from us to the table.
I love you, my brother. That is what I preach constantly: diplomacy and economics. This is why trade is such an important part of the picture. But yes, keep going.
There's a couple of branches of the executive branch that I would like to get rid of. The ATF, DEA, the Department of Homeland Security, all those little bits and pieces that are in the Department of Homeland Security can go back to whatever department they used to be a part of. Let's see, Secretary of Labor, Secretary of Energy and Commerce. I'm for nuclear non-proliferation. We need to be bringing down our nuclear arsenal. And I hope that we never get back in an arms race, because it's not good for the world.
It's the war that nobody can win.
Yes. My first trip to Japan, I was there during the anniversary of the dropping of the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this man was speaking to me in broken English, burns all over the body. So he was really upset, and he just saw some Americans, and he was giving me an earful. I was so mad, because my first thought was, what you mad at me for, man? My ancestors were cooks. They weren't making the decisions.
Yeah.
And I hate to put it that way, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, no, I understand you.
But, we have to understand that there's other people in this world, and that we have done things as a nation to other countries, and they still have a grudge against us. We can't be arming people today to fight a proxy war for us and be fighting those people tomorrow. We have to put an end to that. And
we part of our initiative for the last 50 or 60 years has been to make the world look democratic, like we look, and we've failed miserably at that. And the fact of the matter is, I just look at Iraq as one of many examples. They don't want what we tried to impose on them. They never did want it. It's not a fit for them, and it's not up to us to decide that they need a democratic government.
Yes. I'm thinking about Chinese culture. It's Confucianistic culture. And it's pretty much whatever the leader says, go, because we need a harmonious society. And they value harmony.
What people want. Yes, exactly right. Whatever works for their culture. We can talk about freedom and liberty and democracy until the cows come home. But the fact of the matter is that it is the sovereign right of any country to determine their own path. And it's not up to us whether it's a good path or a bad path. So listen, we're coming close to the end of our time, and we're on the edge of talking here about military engagement. So give me your thoughts before we get off here on military engagement in the world.
I believe that we we should use our military in defense against the nation. And the first strike doctrine that has been a part of our foreign policy, we need to dial that back. After World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, they've been police actions, and we do not need to engage in police actions any further. And the president shouldn't deploy military assets without congressional approval. And I've talked about, you know, people bring up the argument, well, what if the president has to engage in imminent threat? Well, there needs to be a few congressional members, some of the, you know, seasoned leaders that need to be a part of that conversation, because we can't keep giving power to the executive branch and then the next president comes in and the next one comes in, building off the foundation of the previous administrations and using those war powers. You let it slide once, somebody's going to check it and use it. And, you know, being a senator, that's one of the reasons why I want to be a senator, because of the relationship that the Senate has constitutionally with the executive branch. The president can go and make treaties, but they are ratified under the advice and consent of the Senate.
Exactly.
And
by the way, in that regard, so almost all of our current military engagements right now, particularly those in the Middle East, deal from one specific action. It's our response under Article 5 of the NATO Charter to the 9/11 attacks, which were 19 years ago, by the way. You know, it's been a while since the 9/11 attacks, and almost everything that we're doing in the world right now relates to using that NATO charter as our authority for moving forward in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in other places. We're supposedly chasing the perpetrator. Most of the people who planned that, who were alive after it, are, you know, they're geriatric now. They're not out there in the battlefield. We're talking 20 years ago almost, but we're still using this Article 5 of the NATO Charter, a treaty that's Senate approved, by the way, but we're abusing it, and we need to dial back, as you said, perfect choice of words. We need to dial back this idea that we're the world's policemen, and that anything that we don't like, we have the right to go out and chase. So I'm gonna wrap it here right now. But before I do, I promised at the beginning, and we're gonna. What's your new website again? Tell us.
my new website is rickyharringtonsenate.com.
rickyharringtonsenate.com. And I want to encourage people to go there. And what I was going to say earlier on, folks, every campaign needs people and needs money. I don't care if it's just a few dollars. Your gifts to Ricky's campaign can help him to make a difference in Arkansas and in the country. And I think you've seen, as I have seen over the last hour, we're talking to a man here who's he's obviously a high IQ person. He's able to connect the dots, which is something that I have huge appreciation for. A guy who's aware of the facts. He's you know, I always love it when people are aware of who the players are, because that means that they've actually paid attention to what's going on. And so Ricky Harrington is not just you know, some guy that woke up one morning and said, gee, I think I'd like to be a senator. He's a smart guy who has earned the right to be considered for your support. And I think if you go to his site and just give whatever you can afford. And I know these are tough times right now. If you can't afford anything, don't feel pressured. But if you can afford $5, $10, $25, maybe a little bit more to my presidential campaign, I had a couple of people who were incredibly generous. And those gifts, I'll tell you what, when those gifts come in, that makes your day. But even the sweet little the $10 a month ongoing gifts that I got really warmed my heart. So you can go support Ricky. You can support his campaign. You can help him. You've heard him for the last hour. This is a smart guy who needs to speak up for the American people in Arkansas. Please go to his website and take the opportunity to give him your support. And if you can help him out with his campaign, you know, get a hold of the media in Arkansas and have them give him a little bit of attention, whatever you want to do. I'd appreciate that. So Ricky, I'm gonna give you the last minute or two, and then we're gonna say goodbye to our audience.
Thank you, sir. You can also follow me on Twitter, handle Ricky for Senate, FOR Senate. You can also find me at facebook.com/RDH for Senate, the number 4 Senate. And you can see a little bit more of the positions that I hold. And my slogan is, it's your republic. It doesn't belong to just one particular group. It belongs to all of us. And I know some people might have difficulty with those words, but we all have the right to participate in this government. It's a government for the people, by the people, and of the people. And that's what I want to represent. I want people to know that there are people in this world that are 80 years old that do not have the right to vote. They don't have the right. There are some people that might be 80 that choose not to vote. That's their choice. But we have the right to participate in our government. And I would say it's our duty to do so, because there's some people that are less fortunate than us that live in totalitarian regimes, that live in authoritarian regimes. And if somebody gives you a gift, cherish the gift that you have and try to make it better, try to pass it a little bit better than it was whenever you received it. And we want to leave our republic better than when we received it. We're going through some growing pains right now, but that's all right. We wouldn't be where we are right now if the foundations of the Constitution had not been laid the way they were laid. Women have the right to vote. Slavery doesn't exist anymore. All people are equal. We have rights for all people regardless of their religion, their country of origin, their sex, their ethnicity, gender identity, or gender, or sexual orientation. We might mess up along the way, but we continue to make ourselves better. And my hope is that we can stop the political tribalism that's marching us on toward that road of being, you know, some people are kind of excited. They're talking about a civil war, and that should really scare you. The house divided against itself cannot stand, as it says. And we don't want to continue along that path. So my word to everybody is try to understand the human being that's next to you. Show a little empathy. Show some compassion. Try to hear what they're saying, not what you think they're saying. And we can work together.
Wow. Well, okay, folks, you heard it from the man. You know you need to give him your support now. Ricky Dale Harrington, God bless you, my brother. I'm just I'm really impressed at everything I've heard. I look forward to seeing great things of you this election year and beyond. So you just take good care. You let us know what we can do to help, and to all of everyone watching this, please, this is your guy. You know you need to support him. So I'm going to thank you for now. We're going to sign off. This is Ken Armstrong at the Commander's Table, and we will see you again next week. Y'all take good care now.